Hey YouTube, it's Pastor Dwayne here. So here we go. There we go. Hope all is well with everybody here. We are now back on our Wednesday night live streams. This is something I try to do every Wednesday. I don't always get to it, but I am here. And today I want to take a look at Romans chapter 5, verse 1. It's a really interesting textual variant. We don't often hear about it a whole lot because our modern translations and the Textus Receptus and the Byzantine text, for the most part, they all kind of have the same reading. That is, therefore, being justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. But there are a number of manuscripts, it's not a tiny number either, that suggest, therefore, being justified by faith, let us have peace with God. So I want to take a look at that verse, especially in VATICANUS and SINAITICUS. There's some really interesting things going on. There's another kind of more ancient manuscript categorized as GA0220. It's one of our oldest parchment manuscripts. It's 2nd century, I believe, 3rd century. And it has this reading. And then we'll take a look, of course, at Metzger and a couple other commentaries on this passage. So it's going to be really interesting, I think. So I'll go ahead and say hello to everybody who is in the comments. I know there's Get Gnomed. He's the early bird gets the worm. So how's it going, Mr. Gnome? Good to see you here. I actually have coffee in this cup, so I'm not just drinking for show. This is actually an instant espresso, to be honest. But yeah, so I wanted to bring everyone on here and take a look at this passage here today. So, Baby Gremlins, hey, how's it going? I don't think I seen you in the last live stream. Good to see you. Glad you popped in here. So again, we're taking a look at Romans chapter 5, verse 1. I know I can see some of the numbers trickling in there. I feel like I'm going to have to do a little thing for a few minutes while everybody kind of makes their way in. It kind of reminds me of Sunday morning church service. You know, the service starts at 10:30, but everyone trickles in for about 5 or 10 minutes, right? That's how it goes. That's how it goes. No different online than it is in person. So anyway, that's good. So again, this passage is interesting, not because it provides us like a super crazy difference in meaning or anything like that. Again, we have peace with God. It's a statement of fact versus let us have peace with God, which is more of a, the fancy word we use is a hortatory verb, which is generally a verb that invites us to receive of the peace of the peace we have with God. So that's really the question here. Again, it's not really a question, but that's the difference. Is it just simply a statement of fact? Is Paul just addressing the Romans and giving us a statement of fact that when we are justified by faith, we have peace with God? Or is he encouraging us to take part in that peace, knowing then that we have been justified by faith? So yeah, there's a couple contextual considerations there. So we'll be taking a look at that. I'm seeing a couple more people pop in there. We've got Wesley Curry II. The omnibar is the mark of the beast. I don't even know what the omnibar is. The 32,000 is the city of money, the city of Babylon. Most of you shall take the mark of the beast for the money, but no bread for you. Well, we are starting off already with some rather interesting characters. If this is how it's going to go right off the bat, we may mute you. We've got Kevin Hawthorne is in there. He says, good evening. How's it going? Dr. Mike Rev Napier says, good evening, Dwayne. How's it going? Dr. Napier. Mr. Moreno says, the NRSV, other ancient authorities read, let us. And Get Gnomed is welcoming everybody there. Get Gnomed, would you like to moderate this one for me? It looks like we might have a troll in here. If you're willing, I will give you the wrench. I will give you the ban hammer. This got real coffee for those who just came in. Is it, well, depends. Instant, is that real coffee? It is to me at this time of night. How's it going, Eternal Vigilance? Good to see you. I see you are happy. So I will go ahead and we'll do the clicky thing to make you a moderator. There you go. You are a moderator. Standard. There you go. All right. Get Gnomed. You have the power. Yield it responsibly. All right. Okay. So Yeah, let's start here. It's worth kind of just perusing through the different translations just to see what we have here. For the most part, everybody is content to just roll with the indicative. That's the fancy word for saying this is just Paul stating a fact. We have peace with God. All of our modern Bible translations, I think, went that way. I didn't find any. The Amplified was really interesting here. We'll take a look at the Amplified at the end. I know, what do you mean the Amplified? Yeah, I know the Amplified, okay, but it was interesting. It was interesting what they put in the little brackets there. So we'll take a look at that after. But you see the New American Standard, therefore, having been justified by faith, we have peace with God. The 95 is we have peace with God. The 77, we have peace with God. Legacy Standard Bible, we have peace with God. I'm going to skip over the Amplified because I want to kind of separate that out. If I forget, remind me in the comments. Holman Christian, we have been declared righteous. We have peace. So again, no real difference. So why are you spending so much time on this textual variant? Because the transmission is neat. That's why. Because the history of it is really neat. So yeah, if you're looking for a textual variant to get all up in arms, this isn't the video for you. But if you just want to see some neat transmissional stuff, it's here. Okay. So let's start with Bruce Metzger here. I'm gonna pop this open. And we're going to go over to his page. Now, normally I'd have this set up beforehand, but the way the borrowing system has changed in archive.org, we just have to navigate this while we're live here. So his statement here is super interesting. That's Acts. And there's yeah, where am I here? Acts. Wow, Acts has got a lot of variants. We all knew that. Romans 8. Okay, that's too far. Let's go back a few pages. All right, Romans 5:1. We'll zoom right in here so everybody can see. There we go. Let's one more, make it just a bit. All right, so this is what Metzger says. Echoman, he gives it a C rating. So there's not really a whole lot of certainty surrounding that. And it's understandable from this perspective, but this is what he says. He says, although the subjunctive, echoman, okay, so that's spelt with an omega instead of an omicron. Okay, that's the difference. This is a one-letter difference textual variant. So the subjunctive, it's just a fancy Greek grammatical word to say that this is a verb that expresses an uncertainty, okay? In this case, the subjunctive is used as a hortatory address, right? In other words, it's just simply a fancy way of saying it's a verb that we use of encouragement, right? So he's saying, let us have. And then he gives us a whole bunch of defining or a whole bunch of manuscript support for this. So he's got Aleph with the star. Okay, the star means that it's the original reading. It's not a corrector. It's not someone who came in later and fixed it, right? We got Alexandrinus. We've got B, the original. We've got C, Codex D, Codex K. These are all like, our main uncial manuscripts. And then we have a couple minuscules in there, 33 and 81. We've got the Latin editions, Old Latin. We got Vulgate, which is Echomen with the omega. We got some Syriac manuscripts, some Coptic manuscripts, some Armenian, some Ethiopic. And then he goes on to say it has far better external support than the indicative echomen. So in Metzger's mind, what he's saying here is when you take a look at the manuscripts and you see all of the different ways that it reads out, he's saying we have far more external evidence for that. We have far more manuscripts, more weightier manuscripts, according to Metzger, that give us the subjunctive with the omega right there. But he goes on to say, show some of the support that has the indicative with the omicron. So we have the corrector on Aleph. We're going to take a look at that because it's super neat. We have B with the third corrector. I think that's a third corrector or a third hand. G, the Greek portion of it, P, C, 0220 vid. We're going to take a look at that one too, because this one here, 0220, is the oldest manuscript to contain Romans 5:1. And vid there, what vid means, I don't know if you can see that in the screen here, but vid means that this is a kind of disputed reading. Like you've got to look at it because there's some issues with the manuscript there, and it's hard to really determine what it is, but I think we can determine what it is. We'll take a look at that. And then he's got a number of minuscules here. Now he's got the Byzantine text listed here as echomen with the omicron, but the Byzantine text is actually split on this one. If you go into Pickering's text, he's got this split to like, I think it was 47% to 53%. So if you're a majority text person, that is so close that you wouldn't want to use a specific nose counting on that. The lectionaries tend to go with the omicron instead of the omega. We have a couple Latin manuscripts. Now, again, this is where it gets interesting, right? Because some Latin manuscripts have echomen too with the omega. We have the Syriac, the Coptic, which also have the omega in a few manuscripts. So it's like split right down the middle. I think this is probably one of the closest textual variants in the New Testament. Sip of coffee because I'm not hyper enough already. I got to sleep at some point tonight. Okay, but whatever. Metzger blames Tertius. I know he does. We'll get to that. It's all his fault. All right. So he goes, a majority of the committee judged, there's the word judge, that the internal evidence must here take precedence. So it was so close for the committee that they just basically said, you know what, we're going to have to move to internal criteria to do that. And I'm always leery of internal criteria. Like this is not the first thing we use, in my opinion, to make decisions. But if there was ever a place where it was necessary, I think this passage probably is it. So he goes, since in this passage it appears that Paul is not exhorting, but stating facts. Peace is the possession of those who have been justified. It's not a suggestion, or it's not hortatory. It's not, let us. Paul is not in the mode of encouragement in this part of Romans 5. I mean, you could see encouragement as like an overarching theme, but he's still in explanation mode, right? I think it's fair to say that we all recognize the book of Romans as the most systematic display of the gospel in the New Testament. Like this, Romans is it. And he doesn't really get to the hortatory stuff until Romans 12. I think in this case, barring the evidence being so close together, as far as like majority of manuscripts and the Byzantine splits and all that, I think it's probably the right decision to go with the internal criteria suggesting the omicron instead of the omega. So anyway, let's keep going through this. Only the indicative is consonant with the apostles' argument. So since the difference in pronunciation between omicron and omega in the Hellenistic age was almost non-existent, when Paul dictated echomen, Tertius, his amanuensis, 1622, may have written down echomen with the omega instead of the omicron, which he is saying here is what Paul meant. Another set of variant readings involving the interchange of omega and omicron and omega is 1 Corinthians 15:49. We're not going to look at that one today. But I tend to see this as exceptionally problematic. Not just a little, exceptionally problematic. Because let's look at Romans 16:22 so you can understand what's going on. I think most people do if you've been on my channel for a little while, but it's worth coming down here. New King James version. What's happening here is 16:22. 16:22. So in this passage, Tertius stops recording what Paul is saying. Okay. And then he goes, I, Tertius, who wrote this epistle. So Paul is dictating to Tertius what to write down. Greet you in the Lord. Now there's some interesting stuff happening here. I have a little theory. I'll share that with you in a minute. But so what he is suggesting, what Metzger is suggesting here is, well, you know what? Paul meant this not as a hortatory address, but Paul actually meant it as an indicative, as just a simple statement of fact. If you're justified by faith, we have peace with God, because he's still in that explanation mode. So what he's saying is, when he said to Tertius, write down echomen, right? Tertius, instead of writing the omicron, misheard and wrote an omega. Now, the problem here, okay, the problem with this issue is that if that's true, and Tertius wrote the omega instead of the omicron, then this is potentially the biggest conjectural emendation in the entirety of the New Testament, because it hadn't even got onto a manuscript. It didn't even get on a manuscript before before there is an error in it. Okay, this doesn't work. I think this is an exceptionally silly idea. Now, it is interesting to note, though, that omicron and omega did sound essentially the same. I think there's a lengthening in the vowel, which is hard to discern if you're not really paying attention. It might be, if I could do it, it might be echomen versus echomen. I mean, it sounds the same. It sounds the same. I probably did sound the same because I'm not Greek and I can't pronounce those words. But yeah, so when I just, excuse me, that argument just doesn't fly with me. I think he's wrong here. I think this is a bad suggestion. Now, I think the other stuff that he had written, again, Metzger, I find to be hit or miss. I think the stuff he mentioned up about Paul using internal criteria to determine what the reading is, you're kind of stuck because it's right down the middle. So that works. Now, in the Byzantine text, right, Maurice Robinson's 2025. It's coming. It's slow, but it's coming. But in the 2005 edition, he's actually got echomen with the omicron, the indicative, in the body of the text, and then echomen with the omicron, or with the omega in the margin. So in this instance, when you're looking at the Byzantine text type, it's a split, and it's split right down the middle. And in the RP text, Maurice Robinson did exactly the same thing that Metzger is doing here, which is essentially to appeal to the internal criteria because everything else is so close. So you go to the Church Fathers. Yeah, Tertius, I won't be needing your services for my next letter. Maybe he leaves out the T and puts an A. I'll need it later. No, but where was I? I forgot where I was. You know what that means? It means another sip of coffee. Maybe the caffeine juices get rolling. I'll remember where I was. Yeah, so... Okay, I totally lost my train of thought there. That's okay. It happens. It's late here. Yeah, let's come over and we'll take a look at the comments. Let's see here. We had a couple of yous come in. Get Gnome, glad you accepted my offer to keep the rabble rousers out of the comment section. Thank you. It's the realest coffee I've got. Yes, it's got caffeine. That's all that matters, right? I don't know. I like the taste too. Okay. Mr. Moreno, the Revised Version 1881, being therefore justified by faith, let us have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. Yeah, that's interesting one because the Revised Version was the Westcott and Hort base, and the Westcott Hort text went with the subjunctive. He went with the omega. So Baby Gremlins says hello to Gnome. Dr. Mike Rev Napier, it has caffeine, so it has to be real coffee. That's it. Exactly. Even if it was freeze dried and then packaged it up so you can mix it with water later. Just skipping some of the conversation there. Good to hear. Friendly neighborhood Jesus freak. I appear to have been following Erasmus here. Justified, therefore, from faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. Yep. Friendly neighborhood Jesus freak in Latin. I think the difference is one letter, imperative. Habemas, or standard present habemas. Yeah, it's almost like the same. It's a very similar thing going on here. I wonder how different that sounds. Now again, in the Vulgate text, they go with the subjunctive. So the Douay-Rheims version has "let us have peace with God," so they see that as a hortatory. Metzger blames Tertius. Yeah, I know. It's too funny. Jesus Freak Erasmus we have, as does Beza. Excuse me. Beza does have a note, but it's not textual in nature. Also, oddly, his Vulgate says habemas, we have, rather than the standard habemas. Let us have. And then Tertius, I won't be needing your service. Mr. Gekino's laughing at that. And then Friendly Neighborhood Jesus Freak has. Coverdale's Diglot oddly has we may have. Oh, that's interesting. We may have. Very interesting. Even though his Latin has habemus, let us have. Interesting. While you're speaking of Coverdale, let me take a sip of my coffee here. This is a bit of a rabbit trail, but I was in one of the Facebook groups, one of the text critical groups, or maybe it was Textus Receptus, and I guess Wes Huff had made an error and called the Coverdale Bible the Cloverdale Bible. And it turns out that on one of his infographics, he has it written as Cloverdale. So looks like a typo. He may have put that in there. But just as a side note, like, let's give the guy a break. Just give the guy a break. I know that he wasn't so schooled in the ideas of some of the older King James guys. I know he didn't have an idea of who Dean John Burgon was. But nonetheless, I'm not going to hold that entirely against him. Nowadays, I'm under the impression. I say I'm under the impression. Why? Because I've never been to seminary. But my impression of seminary generally is that you go in and you get a critical text education, and you come out using the ways of text criticism from modern perspectives. So I don't think they focus a lot on the work of Scrivener and Burgon and those guys. So it would be understandable that that Wes wouldn't have heard of him because that wasn't part and parcel of his education. That would be my guess. So anyway, people on the other side of the discussion, and I say other side as though I'm a King James Version onlyist. I'm not. I just have some friends that are King James Version onlyists. People on the non-King James Version only side, especially the academic types, tend to steer away from the King James Version discussion. So yeah, probably why you hadn't heard of Dean John Burgon. But nonetheless, okay, it's an interesting hole in his knowledge. But like I said, I would be like, if someone were to put me under a microscope and I shot to fame, I'm sure you would find a tremendous amount of holes in my knowledge as well. So I'm going to treat him like I would want to be treated if that were to happen to me. All right. So Friendly Neighborhood Jesus Freak says, we therefore, being justified through faith, may have peace. Yeah, that's what's his name's stuff there. So yeah, let's pop over here to the to the notes from the net. The net has a rather big note here, and you know what? I think it's probably worthwhile to read it. Let's see if I can zoom in and make it bigger. Oh, can I move that over? I don't know if I can move that over. I'd like to make it bigger. Is there notes on the bottom? No. Okay, we're going to go back up. 4, 5. Maybe if I click the link. There it is. Oh, there we go. Hey, where'd it go? Oh, what did I do? I did something. Okay, Romans. Oh, why is it so hard to use? Doesn't matter. You can get everything set up ahead of time and it still gives you trouble. All right. Oh, hey, it's like skip. Why is it skipping? This is frustrating. That's weird. That's really weird. Okay. You know what? We're just going to go like this then. Okay. So here's the note from the New English translation. So, TC, a number of significant witnesses have the subjunctive echomen. Let us have, instead of echomen, we have. In verse 1, included in the subjunctive support, and he gives the same support, essentially, with a few extras from Metzger, multi number of Latin and Bohairic manuscripts. But the indicative is not without its supporters. So the first corrector and the second corrector on Aleph and B, respectively. We went through these already. We'll take a look at this one. And a couple minuscules, of course, what they seem as the more important ones. If the problem were to be solved on an external basis only, the subjunctive would be preferred. Because of this, the A rating on behalf of the indicative in UBS 5 appears to be overly confident. Now, we didn't take a look at the UBS text, but the UBS text is absolutely confident that it's echomen with the Omicron. So he goes on to say, nevertheless, the indicative is probably correct. First, the earliest witness to Romans 5:1 has the indicative, and that's 0220, it's 3rd century. Second, the first set of correctors, excuse me, is sometimes, if not often, of equal importance with the original hand. Hence, Aleph 1 might be given equal value with Aleph original. Third, there is a good cross-section of witnesses for the indicative. Alexandrian in 002 vid, probably 1881, so on and so forth. It's in the Western with F and G, and the Byzantine noted in the NA28 as PM. PM is like per multi. In other words, many manuscripts. That's the best way I understand it. Thus, although the external evidence is strongly in favor of the subjunctive, the indicative is represented well enough that its ancestry could easily go back to the autograph. Turning to the internal evidence, the indicative gains more ground. 1. The variant may have been produced via an error of hearing, since Omicron and Omega were pronounced alike in ancient Greek. This, of course, does not indicate which reading was the initial text. It only explains the error. So just as a sort of note to that, we do know that there are a number of times where scriptoriums were set up where somebody would literally read the text in front of them, and then what they would do is there would be a group of people copying down what was being read. And you could imagine that in a scenario like that, it would be possible to mishear the O of the Omicron and the O of the Omega. And so by setting up a scriptorium in this way, you find that this could go back and forth in a number of ways. Interestingly enough, I have here, by the way, this is a really excellent resource. This is the Greek New Testament, 4th edition. And by 4th edition, this is Wayne Mitchell's 4th edition. And he lists a number of stuff in his apparatus. It's pretty thorough. And he lists a number of fathers, church fathers on this one. But the problem with the church fathers here is the same church father lists both variants. So you can't just go, well, such and such a father says this, so we got to go with this reading and we got to go with that reading. So yeah, it's an interesting, it's interesting how that goes back and forth. Anyway, so just that, an error of hearing may have produced one of them. In fact, probably. So in light of the indecisiveness of the transcriptional evidence, intrinsic evidence could play a much larger role. This is indeed the case here. And again, this is where I would tend to agree with my critical text friends. The indicative fits well with the overall argument of the book to this point. Absolutely, because what Paul is doing in the first 11 chapters, probably the first 7, really, right? Verse 8, there's kind of this, this encouraging chapter, right? If you know chapter 8. So Paul takes the book of Romans and he just explains from the very first chapter up to chapter 8. This is the gospel. This is what it is. 9, 10, and 11 is the relationship of the gospel to Israel. And then 12 to 16 is basically the sum up of the theology into practical living. That's Paul's style. He starts with theology, ends with practical living. That's what he does. And again, it's no different here because what he's doing here is just that. So is he setting up encouragement in chapter 5? I don't think so. I don't think this is a hoarder. I don't think he's saying, so now that we have this, let us, because he goes on to make more explanation in chapter 5 and chapter 6 with the law and Adam, and chapter 7 and his relationship to the law, and then chapter 8, how we can be in the Spirit. So I would agree here with them. And I think the internal argument is required. Now, again, I'm not a big fan of internal criteria. It's so subjective, right? Somebody could probably come along and say, Dwayne, you're wrong. Listen, this is what he's doing. In fact, I have an example. We'll take a look at that of somebody who's doing that. But let's finish with this note here. So up until now, Paul has been establishing the indicative of the faith. There's only one imperative used rhetorically and only one hortatory subjunctive, and this in the quotation with the diatribe. Again, I wouldn't go into counting how many times somebody uses a specific construction, because there may be justification in a passage for a specific construction that's not made elsewhere in the book. The corpus of Romans is too small for that. Oh, my coffee's cold. Let's just down it. Cold coffee. That didn't take long to get cold. All right. And this in quotation with the diatribe up till this point. While from chapter 6 on, there are 61 imperatives and 7 hortatory subjunctives. Clearly, an exhortation would be out of place in chapter 5. Paul presupposes that the audience has peace with God via reconciliation in verse 10. Yes, that's true. I did see the we have there. This seems to assume the indicative in verse 1, as C.E.B. Cranfield notes, it would surely be strange for Paul, in such a carefully argued writing as this, to exhort his readers to enjoy or to guard a peace which he has not yet explicitly shown to be possessed by them. As in, if you want this peace, you have to have faith. So the notion that Irene echomen can even naturally mean enjoy peace is problematic. Yet those who embrace the subjunctive have to give the verb some such force. Thus, although the external evidence is stronger in support of the subjunctive, the internal evidence points to the indicative, although a decision is difficult. Echomen appears to be the authentic reading. Again, I would agree. This is one of those weird cases, right, where I would agree. So let's pop over to the comments. Let's see what y'all are saying, and then we'll move on to Weymouth, Mr. Weymouth. He's got an interesting take here. So let's pop over here. We got a few coming in. Ye old spelling. So NET note. Let us rephrase Metzger. Nice. Yeah, I mean, really, the NET notes had taken heavily from Metzger. And when I say taken heavily from Metzger, I haven't done a survey of the NET notes to see if they only do the textual critical notes when Metzger has a commentary on it. I'm going to say probably not, because there are more than one commentary out there. But then again, when this was put out, I don't know if there was. In this instance, and in the instances we're looking at, right, they're paraphrasing Metzger. So in the ones where they match up, they take a lot from him. Although I did notice that the NET translation did not roll with it's Tertius's fault. He did it, Tertius. He messed up the manuscript tradition right off the start. So, all right. Helga Evanson, to skip Dean Burgon in seminary education in TC, not even learn the basics of maybe the most important opponent of the CT in the 19th century, and it's part of important history of the TC debate. I know, it's Helga, it's strange. It is strange. Wes is a very smart guy. Part of me even wonders if maybe just in the moment he had for lack of a better word, he had a brain fart and he knows it, and maybe it just didn't come to his mind. I've had that happen where something you definitely know, it doesn't come. I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt here. All right. Banff, and I'm here. James, you are in the chat. Welcome. Helga Evans says, I don't buy it. What do they learn on historical TC debate in seminary? I wonder. Yeah, I don't know. Again, I'm not the product of seminary education, so I don't know. Friendly neighbor of Jesus chokes down a Tylenol. Yeah, I'm choking down a cold coffee, but fortunately, it's all gone now. So, it didn't take long for it to get cold. Staying warm, GG. Yes. I think it's like minus 25 Celsius here with the wind chill. We got the fire rolling. I'm actually like sweating a little bit. You can't really control the heat so well. It just burns and it gets really hot, and you just deal with it. And then in the morning you're really freezing, and so you put more wood in the fire. It's good to go. So we're warm. We had some issues with the church parking lot and snow plowing and stuff, but we're all settled in now. All right. Pretty cold where I live. How cold is it where you are, Mr. Gnomed? This global warming is... Yeah, where's this global warming we've been promised? All right, so they accept internal evidence for Romans 5:1, but not Mark 1:2. Yeah, well, again, this is one of those scenarios where it's just... Internal evidence is just like... It can be so subjective. It's definitely a last resort. So can we call this variant the Westcott hortatory? I like that. The Westcott hortatory. Man, are you a stand-up comedian, Mr. Moreno? If you are, you should totally make a stand-up comedian routine for text criticism. I bet it would be hilarious. All right, NET echoes Metzger. Metzger echoes Hort. Anyone else sick of this academic resistance to change? Amen. Amen. All right. Paul, is Pickering more important than Bergen now? That's a good question. I don't know if I would go he's more important than Bergon. But Pickering definitely has a very important place, especially among the Byzantine majority guys, because he tends to argue rather thoroughly against the critical methodologies. His last series of videos were excellent. I think he did really well in tearing down the foundation of Westcott and Hort. He went into just simply more than recensional theory. I always go on about the fake recension, the Lucian recension that never happened, right? Because that really laid down a lot of the animosity toward the Byzantine manuscripts. Because, when you can explain it away as a recension, who needs to go in there and who needs to look at these other 4,800 manuscripts, right? So it made the work a little easier. Not saying that's the reason why I did that, but it certainly is convenient. Pickering, I would hope that Wes is familiar with his work, because it's quite decent and very scholarly, very academic, and very on point, in my opinion. So James Snap says, yep. And then it's a bunch of parrots. The so-called parrot problem. All right. There's this one interesting Greek New Testament that I happened to find along the way. Let me pull this up here. And I just popped this up on the screen here. This is called the Resultant Greek New Testament. And I had no idea until today that this existed. And this was a work put out by Weymouth. So Weymouth has a translation. He did a translation, and he wanted to bring it into the colloquial language, modern English. And so he did. And I noticed that he was one of the very few who used the hortatory word there. And the reason why is because of his work that he did with the, quote, Resultant Greek New Testament. And so what this is essentially a consensus between all the editions of the Greek New Testament that existed in his time, which was, I would say, the mid 1800s into the early 1900s. I think he died just before 1910. So he basically took Tischendorf's work, Westcott and Hort's work, a number of others' work who had produced a Greek New Testament. And then he went, okay, whatever the consensus reading is, I'm going to put it in the main text, and then I'll put an apparatus in the bottom, and you can see what the differences are among those. I think he included a few manuscripts like Aleph and B, and a few others that were known at the time. But in this edition, here, you can see, I don't know if I can make this bigger. Right. Dikathentes un ekpisteos irinin echomen. And you can see in his edition, oh no, what did I just do? Hang on, let's flip it back. I hope that's right. Okay, don't click the button. Okay, I won't click the button. Okay, so there it is. Echomen. So in his day, a majority of the critical methodologists, nice, went with the subjunctive. So what he had available to him and what they thought the best scholastic work of the day was to have echomen there with the omega, the subjunctive. So that's no longer, right now everybody is generally unified on the indicative. The only exception, going back to that comment about Pickering, Paul says, thanks for your Pickering comments. Paul, is that Paul Anderson? Are you Paul Anderson by chance? If that's you, let us know. If it's you, how's it going? Yeah, so going back to Pickering, the Family 35 text amongst modern printed editions is the only text that I know of that goes with the subjunctive, and then all the other editions of the Greek New Testament go with the indicative. Again, I think the indicative is probably the right one, and this is not a variant that we're going to be like, oh, it's all over, Christianity is done, it's over. We're not going to be like that, okay? But interesting. Okay, no, you're not Paul Anderson. Okay. Nonetheless, I'm not disappointed. I'm glad you're here, Paul Quinn. Thank you very much for asking about Dr. Pickering. I like his work. I don't know if you know, but I was I had a part in helping him bring the second edition into production, into print. So, I'm very familiar with his text. I spent about 2 years going through a number of things in there. Quite a big project, but it's print. It's available. It's ready to go. Now I think it's in its third edition now. I think it was Adam Boyd. Who did a little bit more work on the third edition. So this isn't the result. This is the resultant Greek New Testament. Now, if we come down, I think this was published in the 1900s, or was it the late 1800s? Can't remember. But he has it. Where is it? Romans 5:1 here. Echomen. I don't know what these are. Scrivener's there. But these editions are listed as having the Omicron, and then of course the ones that aren't listed, like Westcott and Hort and Tischendorf and them, would have had the subjunctive. Just an interesting work, just a random interesting work that I found. So we are going to now, after I read the last couple of comments here, we're going to take a look at some of the manuscripts with this one, because this is where it gets interesting. We have, we'll pop over here. Paul, thanks for the Pickering comments. James Snap says, without the Lucianic recension in play, the replacement of the essentially Byzantine TR with 99% Westcott Hort NA UBS compilations as the base text of most English New Testaments never happens. Yeah. Like if it wasn't for the Lucianic recension, that theory, our New Testament would have looked way more like the TR today. In fact, I would be convinced that it would have looked 99.9% like the Byzantine text, like the RP text. I'm convinced of that. Now, can I prove it? Can I prove that? Well, of course you can't prove what might have been. But all I know is this whole thing about going back and the oldest and best and all these, we would have saw them as interesting, what do you call them? Artifacts. But I don't think we would have weighed them anything like was weighed back in the 1800s. Again, my opinion, take it for what it's worth. Take it or leave it. So Daniel Buck says, I read Weymouth as a kid. It was in the 4-column parallel New Testament. Interesting. Yeah, this was printed in the I can't remember if it was the late 18 or the early 1900s. But he died somewhere around 1910. Okay, so Shane Fisher says, I had heard that Pickering's identity for the New Testament text is in the 9th edition. Is that right? I was wondering if it was available online, but couldn't find any links. Yeah, so it's not in the 9th edition. It's the 4th. But there's a number of revisions that have happened to each one. I'm a little confused in how those numbers got worked out. But I think the latest edition is like a revision of the 4th edition. Maybe I'll just say it that way. But yeah, or maybe it's the 5th one. Okay. Either way, it's an excellent book. Totally recommended. So Baby Gremlins, 12 stars wiped off the woman's head in Revelation. Is that in the Westcott and Hort edition? I'm curious about that now. Paul Quinn. Gekanome says, when are we studying those 2,000 Armenian manuscripts or the many Ethiopic, Georgian, and Arabic manuscripts? Me, I don't know any of those languages, so I don't know how much help I'm going to be. I suppose if we see some stuff there, I could, summarize some of that. But yeah, I don't know the languages, so I couldn't even, I can't even read Aramaic. Armenian just looks strange to me. Georgian apparently is very similar to Armenian. So Paul, yes, I saw your work in his Greek text. Thanks for that too. Oh, thank you. James Snap, natural decay must have a sense of humor, affecting the key vowel on Romans 5-1 in GA0220. Yeah. So get gnomed for anyone here who has wrote on papyri. Is it hard to write down on papyri? GG asked the folks at HMML. Baby Gremlins, Weymouth New Testament, no stars on her head. Oh, yeah, there you go. Okay, interesting. Yeah, that's the consensus of the scholarship of the 1800s. All right, so we're going to take a look at the manuscripts. This is why probably most of you are here. All right, I'm sorry. Can you repeat your answer? Unfortunately, it went to two commercials, and I didn't even get to hear the answer. What were you asking? What were you asking, James? Oh, no. Oh, it's Shane. So you want the answer. So yeah, Pickering's Identity of the New Testament, I thought was in the 4th edition. Now, he has done a number of revisions of each edition. So you say the 9th edition. It may be the 9th revision of the 4th or the 5th one. I'm confused. It didn't work out so well. But yeah, I think James was saying that you were saying that you have the 5th edition. So yeah, it's either the 5th or the 4th. I'm sorry. I wish I knew. How that worked out was utterly confusing. But I think Amazon has the latest edition on there. Excuse me. All right. Now let's take a look at screenshot. We're going to go to Codex Sinaiticus, and I am right at the place in the manuscript. So Codex Sinaiticus, 4th century manuscript. If you are a Greek nerd, you probably know exactly where I'm going here. Fortunately for us, this manuscript has indented the passage. The start of the passage, Romans 5:1, starts here. Dikaiothentes un ekpisteos Irinin echomen pros ton theon. So being justified by faith, now being justified by faith, or from faith, we have peace with God. So we have. And so here, so what's going on here? I don't know if I can zoom in a little. If I zoom in, that's going to mess it up. But you have the subjunctive in the original Sinaiticus manuscript, in the initial scribal hand, right there. This, if you saw the thumbnail, this is what I circled in the thumbnail right here, because you have the subjunctive, the omega, but then a scribe, more than likely, we can't prove this, but possibly, looks like went back in and made a correction and put an O or an omicron over top of it. Now, whether this omicron, okay, really tiny, I'm going to try and zoom in. I'm probably going to end up messing everything up here. Let's see. Oh, I know what I can do. Hold on. Just hold on a second here. This is what I'm going to do. We're going to snip it, and then we can zoom it. There we go. Oh, look at that. Perfect. Oh, no, we don't want the line there. Hey, I can even write stuff on here. That's right. Let's do red. So this, oh, no, too big. Oh, there we go. Okay. So there it is right there. So this guy here, this is the omicron. And this, of course, is the omega. So the only thing that I notice here about the omicron is that the ink in it doesn't seem as like messed up as all the ink of everything else around it. It looks pretty clear. So part of me wonders, if this is not something done by the original scribe, because how I would envision it is that if the original scribe went through and wrote all this down and wrote it all down and wrote it all down and came back and made the correction, either he made it in a different type of ink, which is I don't know, maybe he did, or if it was a later scribe with a totally different makeup of ink. Now, if we go to Ira Rabin, Nehemiah Gordon's little XRF machine, I think this would be an interesting one to test out. To see if this comes from a different kind of ink and if we can date that ink. Because I don't even think it's really settled amongst scholars as to whether the first corrector in Sinaiticus was the original scribe or someone contemporary, or if it came much later. I don't think we really know. But nonetheless, someone came along and they made a correction. So that's Codex Sinaiticus. And then we can take a look at Codex Vaticanus. And again, this one is really interesting because it's much more obvious what's going on here. So Codex Vaticanus, you can see it right here. So Echomen. You know what? Let's bring the snipping tool out again, because then we can isolate it. Yeah. Yeah, so there it is. So there it is there. Echomen. Boop. You have the omega there and the omicron. And here's what's interesting about this one. Okay, so clearly the original. I see your comment there, James. We'll go back. We'll go back to Sinaiticus and we'll check out the transcript. Is there a transcript on the Sinaiticus page? I didn't even think to check. Or am I going to need to go to the manuscript room for that? Or CSNTM. Okay, so this is Vaticanus. Again, another 4th century. This is the one with the distigma and the testing on it, and now there's a whole bunch of things up in the air with Vaticanus. Maybe this part of the discussion will age like milk when the rest of that research is out. With all that being said, what we have here is the original scribe writing down the omega for Echomen. So the subjunctive is there. He wrote it down. And what happened is later on in the life of the manuscript, somebody came over and said, oh man, these letters are fading. It would be so much better if we just went over each letter. And then if something is wrong, we'll just not re-ink over that and we'll put the correction in. And that's exactly what happened here. So you can see that somebody went through, re-inked all the letters to make them more legible. And when they came to the the omega here, the scribe who re-inked it went, you know what, this is wrong. I'm not going to re-ink the omega. Instead, I'm going to put the omicron right above it, just so that we can see that this is the proper reading. Okay, now, when did the manuscript get re-inked? That's the question. Nobody knows when the manuscript got re-inked. However, James, I came across one of your articles, and what the article suggested was that it was done. If I'm not mistaken, I can't even remember what I read in the article. I think it was very late. I think he had suggested that Sepulveda re-inked everything when he put the distigma in and had checked it out for a few times. There's a really interesting history surrounding where Vaticanus was before the 1440s. Again, super interesting that would happen. Now, with that being said and done, let's take a look at 0220. So this is a parchment manuscript, not a papyrus manuscript. And it's obviously very fragmentary. So let's snip in here again. This is super handy, actually. I like how this works. Let's close that, actually. So I'll leave that here. The passage in question, it's hard to make out. But I think it is, where was it? So, Dikeothentis, and then all the stuff here, and it is right here, echomen. So there it is. So the passage in question is right here. Let's see, we'll get that, and we'll zoom that right in. So the question is, what's here? Is this an omicron, or is that an an omega. Now, what's interesting here is you can just barely make out the key. And if you look at the manuscript, the key that would fit here, based on what's in the nomina sacra here, again, you're not going to see that so well just because it's not zoomed in. But it looks like it would fit. Oh, there it is. It's right here, right underneath. You can see how that would fit there. And then does this look like an omega? Or does this look like an omicron? And that's what the VID is. I forget. It's a Latin phrase, vid, which basically means that we're kind of guessing. I have to look at it. You have to review it. Oh yeah, you can hear the water running. That's amazing. Yeah, that's the. All right, I'm in the laundry room, and there was some laundry running, and you know what? When the wife is doing laundry, you don't interrupt that. You don't interrupt that. So you guys are going to deal with the running water for a few moments. It shouldn't take long. It's on the spin cycle now. So we'll hear it click and it'll stop. For those married men out there, you know what I mean when you say you don't interrupt the laundry cycle. Yeah, so funny how that one spot in the manuscript that is necessary is fragmented. Yeah, it is fragmented, but I think, okay, just looking at this, blowing it up like this, I think very clearly you can see the roundness of the omicron there. You can see that it's sealed up at the top. If this were an omega, like look at the omega here. Look at the omega here. Is the omega sealed at the top? No, it's not. So I think this is an omicron. I'm pretty sure that's the right case. But what's interesting is if you look at the omicrons here. Now, this is interesting. Okay, this got my attention now. If you look at the omicrons on the manuscript, the other omicrons, they are like, they're not as fat. They're not as fat on the manuscript. Like I'm just looking at the omicrons on here. Oh, there's one. So the omicrons seem rather inconsistent, actually. So given their inconsistency, yeah, I could see that. Yeah, there's one right there that looks kind of like would be filled by the lac in this area here, right there. Yeah, so you know what? It's filled in at the top. It's fat around the edge. Some of them are. I think the scribe was not very consistent with his omicrons by the looks at this page. Yeah, like look at this one. Look at how hideously that is formed. That's a hideous omicron. So yeah. Anyway, so this is our oldest manuscript that contains 0220. Now again, I'm not an oldest is best guy, and I think we're pretty settled that this is echomen with the indicative. But I just kind of wanted to walk through some of the transmissional history of this one because it's super interesting, right? From a majority text perspective, again, I'm not a majority guy. This is essentially split down the middle. I think it was like 57% had one and 43% had the other, or it was 40, 47, 53. Either way, it was really close. So close to the point where somebody who is a majority text guy would be like, this is really close. We should probably take a closer look at this one. And so typically scholarship tended to move toward an internal criteria to determine this one. And I think rightly so. So we land on echomen with the omicron. And I personally think that is probably the right reading. Now, is anything going to change? Is anything going to change at all if we have the omicron or the omega? I tried working through like a theology of Calvinism and Arminianism as an example. Does this variant change how you would look at this from those perspectives? I don't think so. Because if you have the subjunctive there, there's this sort of idea that, we could we could find ourselves in a position as Christians where we feel down in the dumps and stuff, and you could see the subjunctive as sort of like a pick-me-up saying, hey, you're justified by faith, so get into that peace with God, or recognize that you have peace with God, or enjoy that peace with God, as some had suggested. And then, of course, if it's the indicative, well, then we're just simply looking at Paul explaining the gospel in a series of factual statements before he gets to the more practical bits of it. So again, I don't see too much of an issue with this one. Again, it's just an interesting transmissional history to look at. Now, let's take a quick look at some of the comments, and then I want to go to the The one Bible translation I was talking about, what was that? The starts with A. Can't remember now. Okay. I'll see it. I know where it is. So we'll go. Nope, that's not it. Where am I? There we go. All right. So let's take a look at the comments here. Dwayne, just click away the translation and transcript to enlarge the main page view on O1. Okay, let's go back. Let's go back there. I'm going to do exactly what James is telling me. So, there it is. We got the transcription has Echelman with the subjunctive. So they put the subjunctive in Echelman. And they have, look at that. My cursor is too big. Let me see if I can, no, I can't shrink the cursor. Can I make this bigger? Oh, hey, maybe I can do this. This would be wild. Oh, it won't do it. It won't do it. Okay. This is the weird scenario where my cursor is too big and it's actually holding that away from us. I am wondering. Oh, man. Really? Can I zoom in? Oh, maybe I can zoom in. Oh, this is going to look really dumb. That's okay. There you go. Yeah, they got it as the first corrector. There you go. You can see that. All right, let's zoom that back out. So, yeah, they got it as the first corrector. Okay. Dwayne, check the transcript to see if the Omicron is attributed to a corrector. Yes, it is. Mr. Moreno retracted his message. He didn't want us to hear something. He thought twice about it and deleted it. Yes, there is a transcript of O1 on site. Helga Evanson, we have peace with God. That reading makes so much more sense theologically. Well, yeah. Again, though, Helga, practically, if it was the subjunctive, sometimes there's times in our lives where we have the peace of God, but we don't recognize that we have the peace of God. And so you could use a subjunctive to encourage somebody in that, enjoy your peace with God. You have that, right? Yeah. Again, not saying that the subjunctive is original. I'm just saying that you could interpret it in such a way. So Friendly Neighbor Jesus Freak says, yeah, Mr. Moreno, hypothesis, the Omicron over the Omega is from the original autograph, reflecting Paul's initial correction of that silly Tertius. Okay, again, I'm going to say this again because this is worth saying. If Tertius made the mistake of listening to Paul give the indicative and then writes down the subjunctive, then that is the biggest conjectural emendation that we have in the New Testament. Okay, that's where I'm going to roll with that one. All right, makes more sense in context too. Yes, you can hear the water running. The spin cycle is still rolling. I can see the little light in behind there. You're also hearing the vent unit in the house. So somebody's is getting a shower right now, and they've hit the button to vent all the moist air out. This time of year, I'd rather keep that in the house because it gets really dry. Vidatur, kept pure in all ages. I saw what you had written there, something about the white hanger. I actually took it down. I don't know why I took it down, but I took it down. Helga Evanson, water running is good in live stream. It calms you down, just as long as you don't fall asleep. And now you're hearing the pump in the background. The problem is that 1, only an idiot wouldn't proofread a dictated letter before sending it, and 2, ink can be easily scraped off. Papyrus. There you go. And Paul was a very smart man. Part of me thinks that if Paul were alive today, we would classify him as a genius, because you just look at the stuff that he writes down. The guy's a genius. Now you could say he's inspired by the Holy Spirit. Absolutely, he is. But I think the Holy Spirit used his genius mentality to help to help is the wrong word, to guide him into writing the scriptures. How's that? So there we go. Now, there was one more thing that I wanted to take a quick look at, and that was the Amplified. That's it. That was the one I could remember. The Amplified edition, because it kind of captures both. Not that okay, don't get me wrong, okay? I am not a postmodern guy, and I'm not saying both are right, but it's just interesting how they captured both in this one. Where is the Amplified? No, it wasn't the Amplified. No, it was the Amplified. We're just on the wrong passage. Let's go to Romans 5. Romans 5:1. And we'll go down to the Amplified. Excuse me. And it says, therefore, since we have been justified, that is, acquitted of sin, declared blameless before God, right? The Amplified, they put little explanatory notes inside square brackets. Therefore, being justified by faith, let us grasp the fact that we have peace with God and the joy and reconciliation with him. So their little explanatory note seems to be hortatory. Now, again, this isn't scripture, right? These little notes aren't scripture, but it gives us a general idea of how possibly even the indicative could have been understood in a sort of hortatory way. That it's, that we grasp the fact that we have peace with God. And again, this kind of fits nicely. Not that I would necessarily preach this way, at least not without taking a further dive into it. But fits nicely to this idea of we as believers sometimes finding ourselves down in the dumps and in a sense forgetting wonderful in a sense forgetting that we have this peace with God. Like sometimes things can just get crazy and we can get totally overwhelmed with things, and sometimes we just need another brother or sister in the Lord to say, hey, you have peace with God. Have peace. Let's have peace with God, right? You could see how that kind of works well into a scenario like that. Christian McShaffrey, kept pure in all ages. You are now an amplified onlyist. That's awesome. You're going to get kicked out of your church and everything now. I hope the cause is worth it. I hope it's worth it. No, I don't particularly recommend the Amplified Bible. I know some people read it and they love it, and whatever, all the best to them. But there's a lot of conjecture in there, and I would see the Amplified more as a commentary than I would see it as anything else. But nonetheless, I just saw that and that's kind of interesting. So that's what I have for Romans 5:1. Let me take a look at my notes real quickly just to make sure I haven't forgotten anything, because sometimes I go through. Oh, I did forget something. This was the commentary, critical and explanatory on the whole Bible. Now, remember how when we were going through Metzger and the NET notes, what was happening there was they were saying, well, the external evidence is so much more in favor of the subjunctive. But the internal criteria is, way stronger. Now, again, the statement is a little off, right? Because externally, I think it's equal. And so we go to the internal. But in the commentary, critical and explanatory on the whole Bible, they took a different approach where they said, okay, we're going with just the external and we're going to leave it there. So let me pop this up here. I am so frustrated with the sermon editor and logos. I don't know if I can make this bigger. Let's see if I can make that bigger. Things that should be really simple on here sometimes aren't. Oh, there we go. Okay. Like, for example, I don't want this margin on the side. How do I get rid of that? Okay. So here's what the commentary critical says. Justified by faith, we have peace with God. So this is the passage, Romans 5. He says, if we are to be guided by manuscript authority, the true reading here beyond doubt is let us, right? The subjunctive, have peace. A reading, however, which most reject because they think it unnatural to exhort men to have what it belongs to God to give. So basically they're saying, well, peace is only from God to give. It's not something that we can grasp. That's what he's suggesting here. Because the apostle is not here giving exhortations, but stating matters of fact. But as it seems hazardous, okay, and this is my contention with internal. Like I really, what's the term? I don't know if you can sense that I'm being pulled in a couple of ways here because I don't like internal arguments. But as it seems hazardous to set aside the decisive testimony of manuscripts as to what the apostle did write in favor of what we merely think he ought to have written. So the conjecture here is, well, when we make internal arguments, we are saying what he ought to have said on his own writings. And he says, let us pause and ask, if it be the privilege of the justified to have peace with God, why might not the apostle begin his enumeration of the fruits of justification by calling on believers to, quote, realize something that you already have? And again, this comes down to the pastoral notion of watching somebody struggle in a hardship and not like initially realizing or seeing this peace they have with God, having to need someone to come alongside them and say, hey, let's rest in the peace of God, right? So he says justification by calling on believers to realize this peace as belong to them or cherish the joyful consciousness of it as their own. And if this is what he has done, it would not be necessary to continue in the same style, and the other fruits of justification might be set down. So what he's suggesting here is that maybe Romans chapter 5 verse 1 is the place where the tone turns in the book of Romans. So, and the other fruits of justification might be set down simply as matters of fact. This peace is first a change in God's relation to us, and next, as the consequence of this, a change on our part towards him. God, on the one hand, has reconciled us to himself by Jesus, 2 Corinthians 5:18, and we, on the other hand, setting our seal to this, are reconciled to God. The propitiation is the meeting place. There, the controversy on both sides terminates in an honorable and eternal peace. Now, I want to give this one a little bit of thought, because just even as I'm reading that now, there does seem to be a little bit of push-pull with Calvinist soteriology there. I want to think about this one a little bit, because what he's doing here is he's kind of offering up a solution, an interpretive solution for the subjunctive being the case here, and saying, well, hey, let's just go with the manuscripts. We'll take their evidence as final, and then we'll get our interpretation from that, as opposed to saying our interpretation of Romans as a whole will help decide this variant. Interesting. All right. So that to me, that's not necessarily a question of whether it's a subjunctive or whether it's the indicative. That's more a question of, does a textual variant impact doctrine? I want to think through that one. That's a really interesting one to look at. I think I'll have to bookmark that one and come back to it. So there. That's it. That's everything. I think that's everything I got in my notes here. Let me pop them up. Well, you got them right here. But I'm going to go over here, and I'm first of all going to make the lettering much smaller, because that's huge. It's huge for all you Americans with your new president, your newfangled president. We got the net. We did Metzger. We talked about Tertius, Dewey Reams, Weymouth. Yeah, we got it all. Look at that. Perfect. So we'll take a look at the comments here. Let's switch over. All right. Hey, guess what? Good news. The laundry is done. So the water is done. You're not listening to the water anymore. All right. So after Christian McShaffrey's declaration of his newfound amplified onlyism, we'll continue with Jesus Freak's comment here. I feel like the Amplified is often used by hyper-charismatic, health and wealth, name it and claim it, blab it and grab it types who like to tie the Bible in knots to support weird reinterpretations. You know what's interesting about that? That's generally been my experience with the Amplified. This is part of the reason why I wouldn't recommend it, is because the way that those notes are often used without any real context in the notes themselves lends itself to highly misinterpreted things. So, well, why did you use it in your live stream? Well, because I saw a note there and I think it kind of fits with what I'm talking about. So, yeah. Again, that's generally been my experience. I think this is one of the most abused translations, right? And I would call it a commentary. Excuse me. So Helga Evanson says, I think a large percentage of the added words in the Amplified is based on commentaries and word studies. Yeah, precisely. The whole point of it is to amplify the meaning of a passage by putting in the notes there. To cause, campaign, crusade is worth it. Of suitable value, a proper balance to the loss. Wasn't the Amplified originally the work of one person paraphrasing the ASV, sort of like the Living Bible? No, actually, I don't know. Sounded initially like you were talking about Eugene Peterson in the Message, but nonetheless. Yes, but her work has been revised a number of times by now. Okay, so Mr. Moreno, he's got my back. He knows what's going on there. Kept pure in all ages. Lloyd Jones preached a classic sermon on this verse. Okay, I'm going to take a look at that. I really like Lloyd Jones. I've read his Preaching and Preachers book. Absolutely loved it. The Pentecostal in me just went overjoyed when he started talking about the unction. The unction. I love the unction. I think Matthew Everhart, he posted a video today about preaching, and I watched that, and he was talking about the unction. Why don't your sermons have the unction? The power. I love it. All right. DT Zont says, you'll be an American soon. LOL JK. Maybe. That was it. Governor Trudeau. Okay. As a Canadian, okay, no way. That's never going to happen. We have our own Canadian identity. I like being Canadian. Okay. I like that. Okay. I don't like how we are very liberal. I don't like that. Right. But nonetheless, we're Canadian. We're not going to be American. You guys would find, listen, I'm watching all the weather stuff happen down south, and how much you guys are freaking out over 3 inches of snow. Okay. I have 3 feet of snow out there, 3 feet of snow. You guys would die if you came to our country. Okay. You guys would die if you came to our country. You couldn't handle it. Except maybe some of you guys in Michigan and some of the northern states. But nonetheless, Governor Castro. Okay. The likeness is uncanny. I saw an image the other day. I'm not a conspiracy guy. Okay. Generally speaking, I mean, some conspiracies are rather interesting. Like that one. He looks so much like Castro. It's insane. He looks so much. It's so close. It's wild. It's just wild. Yeah. However, this isn't a political channel, so I'm not going to go into the whole political discussion. But it's interesting. All right, friendly neighbor Jesus Freak says, someone like me who can literally walk to Canada. It won't faze me. Yeah, if there was a merger of the U.S. and Canada, part of me would say I'd be okay with it as long as you don't devalue my dollar and I get to receive the American value for the equivalent dollars in my bank account. Trudeau is the son of Castro. Okay. Helga Evanson, I better be careful. He's pro-rogue parliament. So now if the bots go on and hear that I said Trudeau is the son of Castro, they're not going to do anything for at least 3 months until Parliament is no longer pro-rogue. So we're safe. What's actually really cool about that, okay, we're going to talk just a tiny little bit of politics, is some of the nastier bills that they were trying to pass in Canadian Parliament, they all got squashed because of the prorogation. So there is no longer going to be an internet censorship bill passed. And I am exceptionally excited about that because if you don't know, what they had done with our Facebook pages is the government had basically said, you know what, we don't want you to see any news or anything shared on Facebook. So whenever somebody shares a news article on Facebook, I don't see it. It just says this content is restricted and then there's nothing there. So I could just imagine what would happen if this internet censorship bill had passed. So yeah, I'm glad that prorogation stopped it. So we're good for another couple of years or however long it takes them to get things sorted out in March. There's no way he's going to win the next elections. No way. There's no way. It's not happening. Pierre is so far ahead in the polls. It's laughable. We saw a similar thing happen in the provincial elections. when Kathleen Wynne was premier and Doug Ford, I think it was Doug Ford, came in. Totally smashed her. By the end of the provincial election, the Liberal Party lost its official party status. That's how bad it was. And that's the direction the federal Liberals are going. But anyway, enough Canadian politics. Enough of that. We'll come over to the comments here. Jokes aside, Trudeau is a horrible PM and Poilievre is better. 100%. Not to get too political. So Kept Here in All Ages says, it would take me a few hours to drive to our new annex. Well, if that happens, then I guess I wouldn't have to get a passport if I wanted to come down there and see you guys. So I might be coming down south in the near future. So we'll see. We're working on a few things. But yeah. So I think that's everything here. We went through everything that I had listed on there. Again, I'm trying to get things done so that I can get my live streams on Wednesday nights. The truth be told, the last couple Wednesdays, I've just been totally exhausted and was like, you know what? I'm just going to not do it. But yeah, I do want to get regularly on here to discuss some textual related issues. There's a variant in John, which is interesting, not because, again, it has any real meaning to the text. I think it's the difference between having it's in the Gospel of John. No, it's in 1 John. I think it's we love him. We love or we love him. We love him because he first loved us, or we love because he first loved us. Again, it doesn't have any serious bearing on the meaning of the text. Most people would find that rather disinteresting. But I read an article on the ETC blog, and Peter Gurry actually pointed me to that and suggested that because the Byzantine text is slavishly following the Byzantine text form, you have to have the optonen. There's no other reason to have the word there. So I wanted to take a closer look at that and see what's going on. But it seems like if I were just like to immediately look at it, my initial thought is, well, this is electionary intrusion that's putting optonen there to explain something. However, I don't know. I want to look at that. So maybe next Wednesday we'll take a look at that one. I think that'll be an important one for the Byzantine text guys or majority text guys. I remember a while ago I was emailing with I think it was Paul Anderson, and he was talking about the importance of that specific textual variant when it comes to dividing up Byzantine manuscripts. Like it was some sort of what do you call it? Like a diagnostic reading. That's it. So I don't know. Maybe it is. I want to take a closer look at that, especially now that I understand things a little bit more now than I did 10 years ago. All right. James Snap, you mean Trudeau was a terrible prime minister? No, I wish that were true, James. I wish that were true. The reality is Trudeau still is a terrible prime minister, because although he went on the news and he told everybody, I'm resigning, he is now technically the interim prime minister. It's so sneaky. It's so sneaky. Oh, it's so sneaky. He's still the interim prime minister. But with that being said, because Parliament is prorogue, he can do absolutely nothing. I saw in the news just today that he promised to put $1.3 billion into border control. But you might as well just laugh in his face, because he's prorogue Parliament and they can't vote on that. They can't push the bill. They can't spend the money. They can't do anything. And when Parliament resumes in March, maybe February, if this law passes, or if the Supreme Court of Canada, I don't know what we call it, if the court here decides that his prorogation was unlawful, we might see it happen in February. But as soon as he comes back, there's going to be a non-confidence vote, and we're going to go to election. So yeah, his promise of billions of dollars for border blah blah blah, it ain't happening. Trump might as well just laugh in his face. Yeah. Hey, Fisherman's Corner, how's it going? Good to see you. Man, you are awesome. I saw you the other day in Warren's live stream. I was trying to get his attention because he had a really interesting textual discussion about the phrase ho-ti versus hoti. And one means hoti, that which, as opposed to hoti, because of. Oh, thank you very much. I feel I feel bad, Fisherman's Corner. You're dropping the memberships, but we're just finishing up here, so you're gonna have to go and watch watch from the beginning. But come to our live chat at Jamie Russell CME. LOL. We're playing bingo. We love you. Oh, that's awesome. Maybe I will. You know what? Maybe I will. We're just finishing up here. You got put a link in there. Pop a link in there, and I'll swing by. All right. Anyway, I'm gonna give him about 15 seconds to pop a link in there. Curious what they're doing. Jew and Greek, hey, how's it going? It was good to see you on the. It was good to have you on the live stream on Monday. Was that Monday? I think that was Monday. Yeah, Monday. Yeah. So what happened is Monday. We're totally snowed in right now. Like we just have streamers of snow coming off the Great Lakes. That's what happens here. And so I was like, my regular Monday night routine is shot. So I got nothing to do. So I saw someone in my comments, Jew and Greek, and I said, yeah, cool. I'm going to go and I'm going to see if he wants to come and do a live stream just to test things out. And he agreed, and we had a really awesome conversation. So when you're done here, you can go back and watch that on the Long Enneamark and the New King James Version. So yeah. So kept pure in all ages for a Luddite. How does membership work? I don't entirely know. It just popped up one day and said enable me, so I enabled it. And so what that is I guess if you're a member, if you give a certain amount to the channel, I think it's like a monthly amount in a couple different like categories. I think I called them scribes. And really, it just puts a little tag on your name. That's it. I can list you as somebody who received one, or if I'm going to make some choices on what I'm going to talk about, I can leave that open to decide which variant to go into, depending on your level. Again, I don't take that stuff too seriously, but if you do want to give to the channel, you can either click the become a member thing, or you can go to buy me a coffee or whatever. I don't make such a big deal about that. But yeah, I really do appreciate Fisherman Corner's generosity. So we'll be able to purchase a couple more things to keep the channel rolling and keep the technology coming in. There's still a couple more things I need. The computer I'm running on, I think, isn't quite good enough for the live stream. I know there's been some stuttering. I usually go back and play it when I'm done to see what happened or what I can do better, like that kind of stuff. And I'm noticing there's some stuttering going on with the video. I think it's the computer itself, I think, can't handle having all the devices connected up to the dock. So I'm running the camera off the dock. I'm running the monitor off the dock. There's a couple other, the internet's coming off the dock into the surface. And I think it's overheating and causing things to go in a bunch of different directions. So yeah, well, I'll probably be replacing that at some point. I need a third monitor so that I'm not switching things and I can see the stream health. Just things like that. And then of course, text critical books are exceptionally expensive. So yeah, it helps that kind of stuff. So anyway, I think we're done here. Keep an eye out. I had what do you call it? I did a collaboration with Tim Nichols from a Nicholsworth Bible reviews. So we recorded yesterday. I have all the video files all done and ready to go. So I just need to edit that and post that. I'm looking to have that released sometime on Friday and then into Saturday. My goal with the live streams is to be able to get the system set up where I can comfortably have somebody come on to the channel and have a live conversation, as opposed to pre-recording, doing the editing and posting it. So I think that'll be easier for a number of reasons. Editing takes a significant amount of time, and by live streaming, it makes that portion of what I'm doing here a little easier. So yeah, so I ripped off Tim Nichols' bra shirt. Nice. Thanks for the membership. Yeah, so that came from Fisherman's Corner, so you can thank him. All right. Well, brothers and sisters, I think this is a good place to end. I hope you found this discussion helpful. Again, not a huge variant, but just a very interesting transmission history, and I just wanted to kind of dive into that. Anyway, brothers and sisters, until next time, we'll see you around.